What's up, YouTube? Today we've got a very exciting video, and it is the drop of the new season. And with the new season comes new updates to GBL in move sets and in new moves that Pokemon are getting. So I'm very excited to talk about it today. We're just going to kind of go through what those updates were, and then we'll look a tiny bit in depth into certain Pokemon that I think are going to perform really well. I can probably do a follow-up video doing a more in-depth analysis a little bit later, but for now, let's just look at the move updates. So first of all, right away, you're going to see Fire Fang, Ice Fang, and Thunder Fang are all getting their energy generation increased. What this means is that every single time you use this move, it's going to charge a little bit more energy for you to get to those charge moves a little bit quicker. That being said, these fangs are hard-hitting moves, so they're probably not increasing the energy by that much. I can't imagine. And I actually don't think that these elemental fang updates are going to affect the meta really in any way. We will see. I could be wrong. There is one Pokemon that we'll actually talk about a little bit later in this video that I think really might benefit from Fire Fang. And then there are, of course, different Pokemon that have access to Ice Fang, like Feraligatr, or Thunder Fang, like Steelix, that might see some more play. But the next move update we're looking at is Bulldoze. So now Bulldoze was a pretty bad move. It was a high energy move, and it did decent damage, but because it was high energy, the DPE wasn't great. So we're looking at a huge decrease in power from 80 to 45, nearly cut in half. The energy cost has also decreased though. So it's possible that they're making this a 35 energy move for 45 damage. And it now will have the chance to decrease the opponent's defense by 1 stage. So it's going to be maybe a cheap debuffing move. And we're just going to kind of look at what that might entail a little bit later in the video. Other things that we have, the elemental punches are also getting updated. Fire Punch, Ice Punch, Thunder Punch, they're all going from 55 to 60 power. So they're doing a little bit more damage. This won't shake up the meta too much, but it will definitely benefit. It's not going to hurt the Pokemon that are getting this buff, that's for sure. So that could be a decent change. Another change we're looking at is Thunder Shock. Thunder Shock is now going to 4 power. So that means it's 2 damage per turn and 4.5 energy per turn. So this is a very strong move. And anything with Thunder Shock is probably going to want to use it. Give or take the Volt Switch users, it's going to be more preference now because Volt Switch actually does a little bit more damage. However, it charges a little bit less energy. So pick your poison, basically. Accept your poison is delicious. And then Rage Fist is getting the energy cost increased. So we saw Primeape and Annihilape. They didn't really overtake the meta when they got this 35 energy move, but I think they thought maybe Primeape was a little bit too strong. So they're actually immediately nerfing it after giving it its community move. A little bit unfortunate, especially because I just used an Elite TM, but that's why you save the rest, I guess. Okay, and now we're looking at the attack availability updates. This is pretty interesting. So first of all, we're looking at Dragalge, which is getting access to Focus Blast. This isn't gonna help Dragalge at all. It already had a faster charging move that could hit steals for neutral damage in Aquatail. Sure, it might have some random play in some limited cups, like a Fantasy Cup, potentially, which will be on the first 2 weeks of the new season, by the way. So maybe some interesting play there, but other than that, not really. Now this one is something a lot of people kind of expected, and it's rollout on the barrel. Now, why was this expected? This was expected because Feraligatr has been absolutely dominating the meta for the last few seasons with no real hard checks to it. Now, the barrel had the typing of being a hard check to Feraligatr in normal and water, which means it resists Hydro Cannon, it resists Ice Beam, and it double resists the Shadow Claws because it is a normal water typing, right? So with rollout, it can now hit neutrally against Feraligatr and charge fast to its move, and it gets Hyper Fang, which is neutral, into Feraligatr. So this is an extremely dominant matchup now, and it makes Feraligatr need to use Crunch as a potential safe swap, most likely. That we'll see. That, I mean, that'll be give or take. But yeah, this is basically a direct attack on Feraligatr. Without nerfing Feraligatr directly. So I actually really like this change. I think this is a very heads-up play from Niantic. The next one is also very interesting. We're looking at Sand Attack on Gliscor. So obviously Gligar absolutely dominated the meta with its Wing Attack, Dig, Aerial Ace, especially in the Shadow form. Gliscor is going to be very interesting because Sand Attack is a very fast charging move. Gliscor has obviously the same typing as Gligar, but it is going to play a little bit differently. This is going to be better against things that are actually weak to ground. So your poison types, it might bring it back into the meta, especially because Drapion is everywhere. But we'll have to see. I think that's a very cool change, and I'm very excited to try that out. I think that's going to be one of my favorite Pokemon this season. And then we're looking at 2 buffs to Starmie, and that is it's getting Psywave. So we know Psywave is basically a 1-turn Shadow Claw clone. So Psywave, very strong move, one of the strongest fast moves in the game. And then it's also getting an attack buff of Surf. Now, last season this would have been amazing because Surf was a cheaper energy move. This season it got a damage increase as well as an energy increase. So Surf itself is still okay, but it is a little bit longer charging. However, Psywave, a very quick charging move, does decent damage. So I think because Starmie also has access to Power Gem, I think we're going to see it with Psywave, Surf, Power Gem, and it's going to be very strong, even though it's a little bit glassy. So let's take a look at which Pokemon get access to these moves. So first we're looking at Bulldoze. And I've selected a range of Pokemon that I think are interesting. Sandslash. We're looking at Sandslash because you saw I got 2 move updates. It has access to Bulldoze and obviously Ice Punch. Do I think it's going to use it? Probably not. I think Drill Run is still going to be your move to go for. That being said, I think it'll be interesting to see what the stats are on Bulldoze and how it performs, and if it's any different. Okay, this is an interesting one that I think maybe flew under Niantic's radar, and that is Zygarde 50% form. Has access to Bulldoze, which is now a cheap bait move, most likely, that lowers the opponent's defense. And it already has a hard-hitting Dragon Tail fast move. So get ready to see Zygarde 50% form probably everywhere. I would not be surprised. We will see. I think it also still has access to Crunch, so it's going to be probably Dragon Tail, Bulldoze, Crunch. And if it's a 35 energy move like I'm predicting, it could be 40, which would probably be better. Just because of how strong this would be. But if it's 35, get ready for a Zygarde 50%. For the people that haven't already evolved their Zygarde into 100% form. I do believe the 50% form can make it to Ultra League CP, but it'll be interesting to see how this performs in the Great League as well. Okay, Arcanine. So this is the Pokemon I was talking about a little bit earlier that has access. So I believe it's Fire Fang and Thunder Fang. But I think with Fire Fang, the Shadow could actually be pretty strong, especially because it has really cheap charge moves. It has Psychic Fangs, and now it could have Bulldoze. Both might be, they could literally be clones, potentially. So I think Arcanine might have some niche play in some metas. Obviously, its stat product and typing isn't great. It's a mono fire type. It's pretty glassy, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that performs. I think it's one of the few that actually might benefit from this Bulldoze buff. Okay, now we have Bulldor. This is kind of an interesting one. Boulder has okay stats. It recently got the Mud Slap buff in this previous season. But into the next season, we're looking at a potentially cheap ground move that it has access to. So previously it would run, it wouldn't run Bulldoze because it's such an expensive move, and it would use double rock coverage with Rock Slide and Stone Edge, I believe. So now it has access to a cheap ground charge move, and it can use either Stone Edge or Rock Slide for coverage. So I think it's got a pretty cool niche pick, and I think it'll be maybe a fun spice pick that would be a healthy addition to the meta. Okay, here we go. Kamala. Kamala is interesting because it has access to, I believe is it Play Rough, Payback, and Bulldoze. I could be wrong about, I think it's Play Rough, but it's got a fairy, a dark, and a ground. High energy moves. It has rollout. So now Bulldoze could potentially give it a cheap bait move with rollout, and then a hard-hitting either Play Rough or Payback. So I think this is actually going to be a really, really cool pick. And especially for the Retro Cup that's currently on right now, it ends today, well, the day that I'm uploading this. This had unique coverage into the fairy, with the fairy and the dark, and into the Pokemon that were in this meta that were like the dragons and the psychics that kind of went unchecked. So a cool update there. Definitely interested to see how that pans out. I think Kamala actually might be really strong in this next season. And then we're going to look at XL Krokorok. Krokorok's interesting because it obviously has the Mud Slap. It's very glassy, but getting a cheap Bulldoze over an expensive Earthquake, I think will definitely benefit it, just because Mud Slap, it's an okay energy generation move, but it's not great. So I think Krokorok will benefit from this, especially because it's so glassy. It'll get to those charge moves just a little bit quicker, and it might be able to threaten, but I don't think it's going to be meta relevant. And then the last one is Vibrava. Now Vibrava has to be a hundo, fully XL'd. It could even be best buddied, and it still will not reach the 1500 CP cap. I think it gets to like low 13, mid 1300s. However, I think it's a really cool Pokemon. I think it's a really cool pick. It's got the Dragon Ground typing, just like Flygon. And it has access to both Sand Attack and Dragon Breath. So this Pokemon is really cool, and I think the addition of Bulldoze will actually be really good for this Pokemon, especially because previously I think it ran like Bug Buzz and some other really expensive moves. So I think this could be a cool bait move for it, especially if it's going to run Dragon Breath. So yeah, that's Bulldoze. Now let's take a look at Fire Punch. So there are some Pokemon you probably recognize here, and that is Diggersby. Diggersby was a meta staple this season, being able to resist the rollouts, while also there not being too many fighters in this meta. It has access to Fire Punch. This is just a direct buff to Diggersby because, as we saw, the energy generation isn't getting affected, it's just the power. So it's just getting a little bit bump in damage, and I'm interested to see how this changes the Jump Fluff matchup. I think that'll be probably the most interesting thing to look at. Another buff to Magmar, which is really cool. Obviously, its whole evolution line will get this buff. I think Magmar just has the most play because it has the best stat product. That being said, it has access to, I believe, Scorching Sands and Karate Chop already. So it has a really, really good moveset, and Karate Chop being as good as it is, this Fire Punch buff is definitely going to be nice for Magmar. Okay, Hypno. You're going to see a lot of Hypno in this video, and why? That's because it has access to all of the elemental punches, Fire Punch, Ice Punch, and Thunder Punch. So Hypno basically got a triple buff. Use whichever elemental punch you want with it. You could use both, even if you're going to run the Shadow. But yeah, I think this is a very good update for Hypno. I think you're going to see a lot more Hypno this season. Dusclops. Dusclops is another Pokemon that has access to multiple of them. It also has access to Ice Punch, not Thunder Punch though. Dusclops, if you don't know, is actually a very, very bulky Pokemon in the Great League. The addition of a harder hitting Fire Punch is definitely going to benefit it. And I think we are going to see more Dusclops this season because of it. Lopunny. Lopunny is interesting because it has Double Kick and it has the Fire Punch. And it previously didn't really run Fire Punch because it already had Triple Axle. And Triple Axle buffed its attack, and Fire Punch wasn't like that much, wasn't great coverage because you already have the Double Kick. So that being said, with this update, I think it could use it instead of like Focus Blast. I think this does give it a cheaper move to get to, and if you're buffing up your attack, maybe Fire Punches could do a little bit more damage, and you could see some updates to that. Ursaluna is another one that gets like all of the elemental punches. So obviously, in the same sense, the Hypno is going to benefit in the Great League. Ursaluna is going to benefit in the Master League. It did get access to Swift this past season, so whether it uses this move, unsure about yet, but we will see because it now puts it back, kind of back on par with Swift. It's not as cheap, but it does hit a little bit harder with the elemental punches now. So we will see. Obviously, it does not get stabbed, but next one is Ice Punch. And so I've kind of organized these into 3 different rows here. So obviously you have your fighters up top. Counter did get nerfed this past season. So Pokemon like Medicham and Annihilate and Poliwrath are still going to struggle to get to those charge moves a little bit faster. I believe it's 7-6 pacing to the punches. That being said, with it hitting a little bit harder, you might see a little bit of a resurgence for the fighters. Obviously, your most common recently has been Annihilate, but I do think Ice Punch Poliwrath might have some potential. It still might want to use Icy Wind. It'll be interesting to see, but yeah. And then Karate Chop to the Ice Punch, especially with Rage Fist getting nerfed. I doubt we'll see Rage Fist come off this Pokemon, but Ice Punch does give Primeape another option. The second row is Pokemon you've already seen in some of the other move updates. You saw Sandslash get Bulldoze, and all the others get the Elemental Punches. So we're not going to talk about those too much, but just so that you know, all of them have Ice Punch as well. And then the last row is some unique Pokemon that I think might actually really benefit from the Ice Punch buff. Electivire. It is an electric Pokemon with ice coverage, and if you don't know, electric ice is basically a perfect combination of moves, move typings, because it can hit absolutely everything except for the Magnezone line. Electivire's got really great coverage there with Ice Punch and Thundershock, which you saw also got buffed, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later in the video. And then Haunter, it's very glassy, but it did get buffed this past season with Shadow Punch. So now it's going to have Shadow Punch and Ice Punch with Shadow Claw. So it's honestly got a very great moveset, and it hits really hard because of how glassy it is. So yeah, I think it'll be an interesting Pokemon this season. Thunder Punch. Okay, so a lot of these Pokemon got Thunder Punch just a few seasons ago. Some of them have had it for a little bit longer, but these are the Pokemon that I think are going to benefit the most from it. Goodra. Now, Goodra previously ran Aqua-Tail Thunder Punch in the Great League, and that is probably going to remain the same, especially because Goodra previously would only go Aqua-Tail in neutral situations, and that is because they actually did the same amount of damage, but Aqua-Tail is cheaper, so there was no reason to go for Thunder Punch. Now, if you're only going to get to one move, you're going to throw the Thunder Punch because it does slightly more damage in neutral situations. So a cool update to Goodra. Not going to blow it out of the water and make it super OP, but Hypno, you've already seen, we've already discussed. Very bulky Pokemon, has access to all the elemental punches, going to be super strong this season. Chestnut. Chestnut's interesting because it obviously has to run Frenzy Plant. It's one of the strongest moves in the game. But whether you go for Superpower or Thunder Punch coverage is kind of up to you. Superpower, you do get Stab on. It's a cheap move. It hits hard. There's almost no reason to run Thunder Punch. This gives Chestnut a little bit more of a reason to run Thunder Punch, but we'll see how it actually functions with this move update in this meta. But the next one, Pachirisu. Pachirisu, very, very bulky Pokemon. It has a mono moveset in that it only has electric type moves, but it does have access to Volt Switch and it does have access to Thunder Punch. So being a very bulky Pokemon, I think that Pachirisu, especially for those that have access to the Hundo, could see some very cool, unique play in this meta. Typhlosion. Specifically Shadow Typhlosion. This Pokemon is going to be an absolute terror this season, I think. The Blast, Burn, Incinerate, Thunder Punch coverage is going to be insane, especially now that it does more damage. There is nothing in this meta that can swap into it safely other than like dragons and water ground types. Other than that, this Pokemon is going to be very, very scary. Next we have Scrafty. Scrafty got updated with Thunder Punch this past season, but unfortunately because of the counter nerf it did not really have a bunch of play, especially because as a counter unit it's also weak to other fighting types, so not the best typing in this meta. Obviously we've seen Pangoro have a nice rise, but that's because it has the access to Karate Chop. Thunder Punch obviously gives it nice coverage, you don't have to go for the power up punch, but we'll see how it plays this season. I don't think it's going to be great. Muck is an interesting pick. Poison Jab, Thunder Punch could have some unique play, maybe some niche play in the meta. We'll have to see. It's a mono poison type, but could be cool. And then lastly, we have Ampharos. This is more for the Ultra League. Ampharos, very, very strong, has access to Brutal Swing, which just got reworked in this past season, has access to the Trailblaze, which got reworked in this last season. Now it's getting a buff to Thunder Punch, so it's got a bunch of moves to choose from, and it's going to be a meta staple of the Ultra League this season once again. So very cool. Glad to see it get that update. Thundershock. Okay, this is kind of an interesting list, just because of what's on it. So first of all, we have Unova and Stunfisk. Obviously, this is going to be the update of Unova, but Unova and Stunfisk with a Thundershock buff. Let me tell you, this Pokemon is really cool, and it's going to be, because it has the same bulk as Galarian Stunfisk, I think this is going to be a very cool update for this Pokemon. I'm going to skip over those two in the middle right now, just because I also want to talk about another bulky Pokemon in Bellibolt, obviously very bulky as well, but it has the mono electric typing and moveset. It can run Water Gun, but with the update to Thundershock, it's not going to want to. So it's probably going to run either Parabolic Charge or Discharge with Zap Cannon and Thundershock. Because it's bulky and because it has access to a bait move and a hard-hitting move, you could see some maybe niche play, but I think that this Pokemon is not going to be super great. Now we're going to look at two glass cannons right in the middle that hit super hard. We've got one Togedemaru, which Wild Charge, and obviously the newly introduced Morpeko with Aura Wheel. This Pokemon doing more fast move damage after buffing its attack is going to be the scariest thing this meta has ever seen. But I think it's really healthy for the meta because having a glassy Pokemon that can compete with all the bulky Pokemon is really cool. So I think this is a very welcome introduction, but I do think we're going to see a lot of Morpeko this season. So maybe that'll bring back some of the fighters just to counter it. Maybe some fairies. We'll see. Dedenne is also another glassy Pokemon that has access to Thundershock. It's got decent coverage and decent charge moves. The only problem it has is it's glassy. So a little bit of a damage buff to Thundershock is definitely going to benefit it. Magneton. Okay. So a lot of people typically use Magnezone because Magnezone actually, believe it or not, has a better stat product than Magneton, even though Magneton gets to a higher level in both the Great League and the Ultra League. Yes, it can be excelled and get to the Ultra League. So I think Thundershock is going to be a very good update to this Pokemon. That being said, it does have access to Volt Switch, and whether it uses Thundershock over Volt Switch, I'm not sure yet, but it does charge a little bit faster, which means it can get to that cheap move. I believe it's 5-4 pacing, so it will give it some unique play, and I believe this is more just a side grade for Magneton. This is my favorite update to this Pokemon, and it is Melmetal. Now, if you don't know, Melmetal used to be meta in the Master League a long time ago. It completely fell off when they introduced all the other legendary Pokemon that absolutely dominate the meta right now, and for us free-to-play players like myself, we basically have no way to compete at a high level. This past season, they introduced Mudslap to Rhyperior as a buff, which made it a meta staple of the Master League now, which is really cool because it is a free-to-play, easier to access Pokemon. Same goes for Melmetal. So now we've got multiple Pokemon that you can access in the Master League for free and compete at a high level, which is really exciting, and I'm so glad they're making these changes. I think they're heading in the absolutely right direction with this, and I think this is a fantastic update to Melmetal. Now hopefully it gets a buff to Double Iron Bash and we can actually see some play, but Thundershock's buff is definitely not going to hurt it. And then last is actually one of my favorite Pokemon because it used to be one of my favorite core breakers, and that is Thundershock Emolga. Now Emolga, in past seasons, it was one of the few Pokemon that could beat both Gligar and Skarmory because it resisted their entire movesets for both of them, while also hitting neutrally with acrobatics. So I think this Pokemon is really cool, and it also had unique play into all the waters in the meta, like Feraligatr, and as well as the grass because it's a flying type. So I think Emolga, one of my favorite typings. It's unfortunately a pretty classy Pokemon, but the XL variant in the Great League is actually pretty strong. So yeah, a welcome change, and I'm excited to see how that affects Emolga in the Great League. Now we're going to look at the 3 new move updates of the season, and that is Rollout Bibarel, Sand Attack Gliscor, and Sideways Surf Starmie. So Bibarel with Rollout, as you're seeing, it's getting a pretty crazy update in, what is that, 490 overall average rating. And I believe does that say 18 and 15? Or 18 and 16? Either way, I can't read it right now because it's tiny on my screen. But yeah, I think this is a great update to Bibarel, and it's obviously only going to get better than Water Gun. It looks like it does have some pretty polarizing matchups at the far left there, but overall, it looks like it could even be a good safe swap because it's got a pretty neutral middle peak there. So very cool Pokemon. Very nice update there for Bibarel. Sand Attack Gliscor, going to be one of my favorites. You see that average rating above 500, and I believe that I might say like a 1916 record, not really sure, but yeah, I mean, this Pokemon with Sand Attack is going to be a really awesome and welcome change, especially with all the electric type buffs that we saw this season. But like I said in the last slide, that Emolga does still wall this moveset. So yeah, I think it'll be interesting for Gliscor in the Great League as well as the Ultra League. I think Sand Attack Gliscor is definitely going to be interesting. But yeah, and then we have Starmie getting access to Psywave and Surf. Already had access to Power Gem. It's got some really good matchups there. A lot of really good matchups actually on the far right there. as well as some pretty poor matchups. So it's kind of feast or famine, this Pokemon. It's probably a Pokemon you want in the back, so you can align it on what you want. Um, and then with shields up, because it's classy, I think this Pokemon is going to be really, really strong. So yeah, those are all the move updates. Sorry for the lengthy video, but there was a lot to cover. I think there's going to be a lot of cool meta shakeups. I'm excited to see what the specific values are on the energy generation of like certain moves like Bulldoze, what the cost is going to be, and just maybe the Fangs, see how that really shakes up the meta, because that'll be very interesting. But yeah, I'm very excited for the new season. We've got a couple new Pokemon being introduced soon that I didn't really talk about, but one of them's getting introduced in the last event of this season, and then the next one is not really relevant because it's not PvP relevant next season. So yeah, those are the Pokemon updates to their movesets. I hope you guys enjoy the video, and until next time, peace.